Let me send her a message.
But this isn't really the time. We need to go ahead and get started. If we could have you head to the Armenian room. Your name is okay. I could hear you fine when you were in your room, so I think it's okay to just move forward right now. Okay, well,
what do you want me to do here? You tell me.
Okay, we can hear you now, and you're in the English channel. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If you could head to the Armenian channel so that we can have our speakers begin.
Alejandra.
Yes.
How about the Cambodian participants? Are they in this room too? Because we don't have our room. So,
Pete, I'll text you individually. Alejandra,
okay.
Could you put Ruben in the Armenian room? Guys, I understand you are getting ready to get the show started. So our host is getting ready to start the show. There are people waiting. So let's talk about anything that you may have a concern with afterwards. So let the game start. So thank you.
I have Ruben Avedisian and interpreter Armenian Ara Hakobian in Armenian room already.
You should just have 2 interpreters in the Armenian room.
Correct.
Good. We're good. And Sapip, I will text you individually. Just hang tight, okay?
Okay, yes.
Ruben is having problems connecting his audio. This is the reason why he is not in his room yet. It is 9:06 and we really need to get started.
It's okay. We could just start because we have Ara in the Armenian room.
Okay, sounds good.
Do whatever you have to do to get the game started.
Perfect.
The show started.
I will go ahead and share my screen now. And I have Cassandra here helping me. Please go ahead and allow everyone in. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome. We're going to go ahead and allow everyone a few seconds to get adjusted here. Lots of people logging in. Welcome, welcome. We're going to start in 15 seconds or so. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. Good morning. So again, good morning and welcome to another session of Small Business Strong. This is a special session for Small Business Strong as we have the SBA joining us to share a lot of information for you. But before we begin, of course, we always like to start off with our Zoom guidelines. This session is being broadcast in multiple languages. So make sure that you click on the interpretation button. You can see it on here and on the screen that I'm currently sharing. Select the language that you prefer to be listening in. And also additional reminders, please be sure to remain on mute to prevent any background noise from coming through. We do have a lot of questions that are going to want to be asked. Please use the chat box to ask all of your questions. We are recording the session and it will be shared with everyone that joined and registered here today. And now I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to our President and CEO, Maria Salinas. Welcome, Maria.
Great. Thank you very much, Alejandra, for that introduction. And I'd like to welcome everyone to this special presentation of Small Business Strong. We at the LA Chamber are certainly very much interested in making sure that we share out information, good information that is coming to us from our partners like the Small Business Administration. So I think you will find today's program one that is very insightful and very helpful around the grants and the information that is available today. Our expert speaker, Ben Raju, who's the District Director of the U.S. Small Business Administration, will speak on the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. This fund was established by the American Rescue Plan Act to provide emergency assistance to eligible restaurants bars, and other qualifying businesses impacted by COVID-19. So I'd like to welcome Ben, and I know that he will give just a very important and worthwhile presentation on that. But before we get to Ben, I'd like to invite our speakers this morning. We are very honored to introduce to you Congresswoman Judy Chu, who will provide some remarks. After the Congresswoman, we have the honor of also hearing from Assembly Member Adrian Nazarian, who will also share remarks. So I believe right now we will go to the Congresswoman.
Hello, I'm Congressmember Judy Chu. As a representative from the San Gabriel Valley and a member of the House Small Business Committee, I want to thank the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce for holding this important event today. And I especially want to thank the SBA's Los Angeles District Director, Ben Raju, for joining to help our small businesses understand the ins and outs of the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. Since the early days of the pandemic, it has been clear that restaurants, bars, and other dining establishments were facing uniquely challenging circumstances. To protect public health and limit spread of the virus, restaurants that were already getting by on thin margins could only operate at very limited capacity, and bars were largely shuttered. This meant that these pillars of our local economy were paying the price for defeating the coronavirus, and that was not fair. That's why I fought so hard to create a dedicated grant fund specifically for restaurants. And now, thanks to the American Rescue Plan, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund is here to help. Starting this week, the millions of restaurants and bars across our country can access the support they need to make it through the end of the pandemic without having to sacrifice their business. And because this is a grant program, the money does not need to be paid back. This is not a loan, it is a lifeline to our communities. To ensure that underserved businesses have a fair shot at this assistance, the first 21 days are reserved for those owned by women, veterans, people of color, and those in low-income areas. Restaurants and bars are so important to our communities, especially here in Los Angeles, where they are expressions of the diversity and culture that make our city such a special place to live. Losing these small businesses should not be the price of defeating the pandemic, and thanks to the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, they don't have to be. So thank you for being here today to learn more, and I encourage you to apply for your funds today.
And we do not have Assembly Member Nazarian here. So we're going to go ahead and continue with our program. And now I'd like to introduce you to Ben Raju, the Los Angeles District Office, U.S. Small Business Administration.
Hey, thank you, Alejandra. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I just want to double check one more time whether or not Assemblymember Nazarian is on. I think I saw his information there, and I think he is on. I'm going to go ahead and stand by and let him do his introduction.
Hi, Ben. Apologies for the technical glitches. I just wanted to join you and welcome all the business participants who are here today. First of all, thank you to the LA Chamber of Commerce and to Maria Salinas for hosting.
Sorry, can't hear you.
Again, very much happy that Congresswoman Judy Chu could be joining as well. And without keeping anyone further, wanted to just say thank you to SBA for being such a wonderful partner and always joining and always wanting to host these events in order for us to be able to better provide information for our small businesses to thrive and to be successful. I know it's been a very difficult year, but the end of the tunnel, we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Thanks again, all of you. Ben, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate you being here and the kind words. You're right. It's been a tough time for business owners. And this group that the LA Chamber has assembled here today to be able to make sure that our business owners are provided the information that they vitally need to be able to survive through this difficult time. For our restaurants, we'll be talking about the Restaurant Revitalization Fund today. And that was created out of the American Rescue Plan Act. And today we've got an amazing opportunity. We have folks from throughout the state of California that have registered. And we actually have with us district directors from the SBA from throughout the state as well. We have our San Francisco district office for the SBA represented here today. We have our with Julie Klaus, the district director. We have Heather Lutzy from our Sacramento district office that is on and will be able to answer our questions. Additionally, we have Don Golick, who is the director out of the Fresno district office here. And again, just as Maria and the Congresswoman and the Assembly members stated, everybody is here to support our small businesses. Now, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund it provides over $28 billion for our restaurants to be able to recover from the devastating effects of COVID-19 and the results of having to be shut down and not fully operational. Now, these funds will be eligible to be able to be used until March 11th, 2023. Next slide. Now, there's a variety of folks that are able to use these funds. It's not just for our brick and mortar restaurants. It is also for our food stands, food trucks, food carts, as well as our caterers, bars and saloons, lounges and taverns, as well as folks like coffee shops and ice cream shops that sell snacks and non-alcoholic beverages. Bakeries are eligible as long as their sales to the public on food and beverage are over 33% of their gross receipts. Additionally, we have assistance available for brew pubs, tasting rooms, tap rooms, breweries, microbreweries, wineries, and distilleries. And again, as long as their sales to the public for food and beverage exceed 33% on their gross receipts. And we're going to talk a little bit later on about gross receipts, what to include, what not to include. We're going to go into some calculations as well and different things. So we're going to cover these in a little bit more detail. Additionally, inns are eligible if their on-site sales for food and beverage to the public comprise of at least 33% of their gross receipts. Licensed facilities or premises for beverages or alcohol producers where they have a public tasting room or an area where folks are able to sample or purchase products, and other similar places of business where the public or patrons assemble for the primary purpose of being served food or drink. Next slide. Now, there's a couple of folks or areas that folks would be ineligible. Additionally, their entities that are ineligible include state or local government operated businesses. As of March 13th, if you own or operate more than 20 locations, and that includes whether or not they're all restaurants or not all restaurants. So any of the affiliated businesses, if you have more than 20 locations, you are ineligible to apply. If you have a pending application, or if you have received the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant, you are ineligible as well. If you're a publicly traded company, if you're permanently closed, now this does not mean if you closed as a result of the pandemic or local regulations. This means if you are permanently closed with no intent to reopen. Additionally, if your losses do not exceed $1,000, if they're less than $1,000, the minimum award being $1,000, you would be ineligible. Next slide. Now, SBA may provide for, as far as the eligible loan limit or eligible grant limits, are up to $5 million per location and not to exceed $10 million total for the applicant or any affiliated businesses. So if you have multiple locations, less than 20, of course, you can be eligible for up to $10 million for your total for all of your affiliated businesses. And as I mentioned before, the minimum award is $1,000. Next slide. Now, unlike typical grant programs, the RRF program was created a little bit differently than most grant programs where you would need to register with SAM.gov. This program, you do not need to register with SAM.gov, and it does not require a DUNS number or a CAGE identifier. Additionally, individuals that have valid unexpired ITINs can apply for this program. And I'll repeat that. Valid unexpired ITINs are acceptable for this program to be able to apply. And there's some links here, and we'll make sure that they're in the chat box as well. We will make sure that these links to be able to clarify the ITIN requirements. And again, they have to be valid and unexpired ITINs in order to be able to apply for the program. Next slide. Now, eligible applicants can be from any of the following areas as far as the way that the business is organized. It's C corporations, S corporations, if you're a partnership or an LLC, sole proprietors, as well as self-employed individuals and independent contractors, as well as tribal businesses, as well as LLCs taxed as S corporations or sole proprietors. So it's very important that folks can see that there was a wide variety of areas of businesses that are eligible to be able to apply. Next slide. Additionally, franchises can apply as well. Now, this is a question that's come up quite often, and folks have questions regarding whether or not their franchise is eligible, or if they can apply. If they're operating as a franchise and they meet all of the other program requirements, the business owner is eligible to be able to apply if they are listed on the SBA franchise directory. In the application portal, applicants will be able to look and see whether or not their franchise is on the directory. So when you register, which registration is now open, and you are able to apply, you'll be able to go in and see your franchise and if it is on the directory. Folks can register, and we drop the registration link inside the chat box as well for folks to be able to register and apply through the portal. Now, for brands that are not listed on the directory, including brands that have been previously denied, you can still submit the franchise documents and all of the other documents. The franchisee is able to send that to franchise@sba.gov for review. Again, folks can send the franchise documents and all the supporting documents signed by the franchisee to franchise@sba.gov. Next slide. Now, folks that are currently operating a plan of reorganization under Chapter 11, 12, or 13 in bankruptcy are eligible to apply if they meet all other program requirements. So again, even if you are in bankruptcy, as long as you have an approved plan of reorganization, whether it's a Chapter 11, 12, or 13, and you have an approved plan of reorganization, you are eligible to be able to apply for this funding. An applicant cannot apply If you are permanently closed, filed a Chapter 7, liquidation, bankruptcy, or filed Chapter 7, 11, 12, or 13, however, you're not under approved plan of reorganization. Again, if you are not under an approved plan of reorganization, you are not eligible to apply. If you are under a plan of reorganization and you filed a Chapter 11, 12, or 13, and you meet all of the other program requirements, you can apply for the program. Now, as I mentioned before, permanently closed in this category for this program does not mean that you closed your businesses temporarily due to state or local restrictions or pandemic causes. Permanently closed means if you closed the doors and had no intent of reopening. If you had to close as a result of local or state restrictions and are reopening, you are eligible to apply for this program as long as you meet all of the other requirements. Next slide. Now, anybody that has multiple locations, you must count all locations owned or operated under the applicant's business's EIN, including applicant's business affiliates, even those that are not eligible for RRF. So if you have a dry cleaner and you have a restaurant, you're counting both of those as far as your number of locations. Now, any entity that together with its affiliates owns or operates more than 20 locations, regardless of whether that business operates under a different name or is in a different type of business, you are not eligible for RRF. So if you operate more than 20 locations, whether the business operates under a different name or is a different type of business, you are not eligible for RRF. If you have 16 dry cleaners and 5 restaurants, that would be 21 locations, which would mean that you are not eligible for RRF. Each place where the applicant or affiliates conduct sales from a permanent structure is counted as a location. If the applicant or the affiliate conducts sales from multiple permanent locations, each address is a separate location. For a caterer or a single business with multiple food stands or trucks or carts, the physical location is where the business is headquartered. So if you have multiple food stands, trucks or food carts, the physical location is where your business is located. If the business has one permanent structure with 5 food trucks and you have one location, a caterer will have one location. Next slide. Corporate groups. Locations owned and operated by a single corporation or corporate group will count towards the 20 location maximum limit for eligibility and the $10 million aggregate on the RRF funding. Businesses that are a part of a single corporate group that in the aggregate own or operate more than 20 locations are not eligible for RRF funds. Again, businesses that are part of a single corporate group that in the aggregate own or operate more than 20 locations, you are not eligible for RRF funds. When individuals or entities directly or indirectly own or control multiple locations, all locations must be counted towards the 20 location maximum for eligibility. Additionally, these include any locations that operate under a separate tax ID or name, as well as applies to whether or not the ownership or control is through an individual or a holding company or a management company. Again, it's important that all of these locations are counted when you're applying. For example, if an individual owns and controls 16 restaurants, each with a separate tax ID number, Since all of these businesses and restaurants are counted, none of the restaurants are eligible for RRF funds because you would have exceeded the maximum. Next slide. When you're filling out your RRF application, you will be asked if the applicant has any affiliates. You must select yes if the RRF eligible applicant entity has an equity interest or right to profit distributions of 50% or greater of one or more other business entity. You must select yes if you have a 50% or greater equity interest or right to profits of 50% or greater of one or more business entities. You must also select yes if any owner has 20% or greater equity interest of the RRF eligible applicant entity and has any equity interest or right to profit distributions of more than 50% of any other business or entity, regardless if they're a restaurant or not. You must also select yes if the applicant business is a holding company or management company that owns or manages a business other than the applicant business, or if the applicant business is held or managed by a company that owns or manages other businesses. You must count these entities as separate affiliate locations, and they all go towards the 20 location maximum. Again, I want to emphasize, regardless if they are a restaurant or not, we want to make sure that those are counted. Next slide. There we go. Oh, we're going to go two more forward. So there we go. All right. Now, many folks may have applied for other SBA relief programs or other programs in general, whether they're from the city or county or whether they were from other areas. As far as the Paycheck Protection Program, any funds that you've received from the PPP will be subtracted from your RRF funds or eligible amount. Any funds that have already been received through the Paycheck Protection Program will be subtracted from the applicant's final funding amount for the RRF program. Now, you're going to be verified using your EIN, ITIN, or Social Security number associated with the PPP loans. It's going to be important that you apply in the same way that you applied for your PPP loan. If the applicant received a PPP loan, the applicant must use the same EIN number for its RRF application. If you're as an applicant, you applied for first draw PPP loan for multiple locations under one EIN, and then subsequently for the second draw, you applied for PPP loans under each different EIN, you must provide all the EINs for each entity that received second draw PPP loans. And again, those will each be subtracted from each of those areas for your final funding amount. Upon applying for the RRF, you must withdraw any outstanding PPP application. All applicants must certify that the current economic uncertainty makes this funding request necessary to support ongoing or anticipated operations. And this is key. As you apply for the program, all applicants are certifying that based on the current economic conditions and the uncertainty, it makes this funding necessary in order to support the ongoing operations of your business. Next slide. Now, as far as what is going to be an eligible expense, it is going to be a variety of different expenses. Some of them are going to be familiar. If you applied for PPP or economic injury disaster loan, a lot of these use of proceeds or eligible use of funds are similar. However, there are a few others that are not, and we're going to go over a few of those here. Any business or payroll costs, including sick leave, are eligible expenses. Additionally, any utility payments, maintenance expenses, supplies, even PPE or cleaning materials, in order to adhere to local guidelines, those are eligible expenses. Additionally, any business Food and beverage expenses, as well as raw materials, are included as an eligible expense as well. This includes covered supplier costs and operating expenses like insurance, marketing fees, licensing, legal, as well as POS equipment, etc. If you had to construct outdoor seating, if you had to get barriers, if you had to get additional equipment in order to accommodate local guidelines and to continue operations, those construction of outdoor seatings and the costs that you incurred are eligible. However, if you're expanding your business, those costs are not eligible. Again, the construction of outdoor seating in order to meet local ordinances or guidelines, those are eligible expenses. However, if you're expanding your business, whether it's to another location, another unit within the same area, any expansions are not an eligible expense. Now, your payment of business debts, as long as they're the principal and interest and you're not prepaying a loan, those are eligible expenses. So if you have a mortgage obligation, or if you have a business debt service like a credit card or anything like that, you are eligible to use those. Those are considered eligible expenses for these funds. Next slide. Now, we covered a list of the eligible expenses. Now, these funds must be spent on those expenses that we just covered, as long as they were incurred between February 15th and March 11th, 2023. Again, if any of those eligible expenses that we just discussed were incurred between February 15th and March 11th, 2023, or are going to be incurred by March 11th, 2023, these funds can be used on those. If the business permanently closes after receiving the RRF funds, and again, permanently closes, the covered period will end when the business permanently closes, or on March 11th, 2023, whichever occurs first. Any funds that are not spent on eligible expenses by the end of the covered period, they must be returned to the government. So again, March 11th, 2023 is the end of the program, period. If you have incurred expenses between February 15th and March 11th, 2023, and they fall under one of the eligible categories, you can use these funds to be able to pay for those costs. Next slide. Now, as far as this is one of the questions that has come up quite a bit. When do I have to use the funds? And how do I show that we have used all of the funds as intended? Now, a detailed expenditure report or certification will be required after the total awarded funds have been exhausted. So after you use all the money, entities must provide a detailed expenditure report for that period. Now, until you complete the use of funds assessments, beginning in December of 2021, applicants are required to provide self-reported unaudited data detailing the use of the distributed funds through the end of the 2023 period. Again, you must keep documentations on all of the uses that you have had for these funds, and you will be required to provide a detailed expenditure report and certify that you used the funds for these purposes. Now, as far as how that is going to be done, we're going to outline that in the upcoming weeks, and we're going to provide detailed reporting requirements and the procedures that you will use in order to report that. Next slide. And Julie, I know you're on as well. Did you want to cover the calculation periods?
Sure, Ben.
Thank you.
So, good morning, everyone. I'll walk you through the calculations This is how you calculate how much you can be eligible for under this grant. And then we'll also talk about documentation that you need to submit as part of your application. So this is a lot of information. And I did want to remind people that all of this information is also available on our website, sba.gov/restaurants. We've been dropping some links into the chat. There's a knowledge base there. There's a user guide, great resources. You don't have to scribble all of this information down. It is there on the website for you. Additionally, a quick reminder, we have some people answering questions in the chat. If you'd like to drop your specific question in there, we'll try to adjust it via chat or live. So let's talk about the calculations. There are different ways to calculate how much you can be eligible for, depending on when your business has been in operation. So calculation 1, this is for everyone who had an operating business on or prior to January 1st of 2019. This is the date that your business opened. So this is not tied to opening and closing because of COVID restrictions. This is when you started your business and you opened it for operations to the public. So if you started in 2019 or prior, you want to use this calculation. And it's simply look at your 2019 gross receipts minus your 2020 gross receipts minus any PPP loan amounts you may have. So again, this is 2019 gross receipts less your 2020 gross receipts, and then subtract any PPP loan amounts you may have had, and you will calculate how much you're eligible for under this program. The next slide. Calculation 2 is for those businesses who operated, maybe you started in 2019, so you were only partially in operation in 2019. You're going to take an average of your monthly gross receipts. So let's say you started your operations in June of 2019. You will have 6 months of gross receipts. You will add those up and divide by 6 to get your average. Times it by 12 to get an entire year's worth of gross receipts, and then subtract that number from your 2020 gross receipts, less any PPP loan amounts. So again, if you started business in 2019, so you weren't in operation for a full 12 months, you will take an average of your monthly gross receipts from 2019, times it by 12, and then subtract that number from your 2020 gross receipts, and then subtract any PPP loan amounts. And then if we go to the next slide, we have a third option. So this is for businesses that have may not even have opened yet, or businesses that maybe started, but they started between January 1, 2020 to March 10th of 2021. You may not be open to the public yet, but you certainly have incurred costs as of March 11th of 2021. So in this calculation, we're going to focus more on the costs that you've incurred rather than revenue. So we're going to look at the total amount you spent on the eligible costs. Those were what Ben outlined in a prior slide between February 15th of 2020 and March 11th of 2021. So you're going to take the total amount of the eligible expenses minus any receipts that you may have had if you have gross receipts from 2020 and 2021, minus any PPP loan amounts that you may have had. So again, this one is a little different because we're looking at your expenses that you've incurred between February 15th, 2020 and March 11th, 2021, less any gross receipts you might have in 2020 and 2021, less any PPP loan amounts. Now, for businesses that began operation partially in 2019, You have a choice of looking at the second calculation or this third calculation. And so you might want to calculate your eligible amount under both scenarios and see which is more beneficial to you. The next slide, please. It's called Calculation 4, but it's really an example of what to do if you have multiple locations. And maybe those locations opened at different times, so you're using different calculations. Simply calculate your funding amounts for each location separately using whatever calculation method applies, and then you can aggregate those amounts together. But remember that aggregated funding is limited to $5 million per location on $10 million total for the applicant and its affiliates. Next slide, please. So there are certain things that you do not need to include in your 2020 gross receipts. And these are largely the funds you may have received from any of these COVID financing programs. You do not need to include the Paycheck Protection Program loan as part of your gross receipts. You do not need to include any Section 1112 payments. These were SBA's debt relief program payments, if that applies to you. You do not need to include any economic injury disaster loan or the EIDL advance or the targeted advance. Similarly, if you received any state or local business assistance grants, you do not need to include those as income for this purpose. So basically, you do not need to include any of the COVID-related financing benefits you may have received from the federal government, state, or local government. Next slide, please. So how do you apply? There are different ways you can apply for this program. You can apply directly to SBA through our website, restaurants.sba.gov, or you can apply through a point of sale vendor if you utilize one. Currently, Square and Toast are able to accept applications and submit them directly to SBA. They are not making the decision on the grant amount, but they are collecting the application information and submitting it to SBA on your behalf. The third way you can apply is through the telephone. We have a telephone number here, 844-279-8898. This number is to help you answer questions, but also if you do not have broadband access or internet access, you can apply through the telephone. This process will take longer as the documents will need to be sent to you for signature and verification before they are officially submitted to SBA for processing. But 3 ways to apply. The next slide, please. We're going to talk about documentation. And again, all of this information is also on our website, so you can read through this a little bit more carefully later on when you have some more time. But I'm going to try to quickly go through the types of documents you will need. Obviously, you will need to do the application. This is built into SBA's online platform, so you do not have to download and fill out a paper application. You will fill out the digital form directly on our website. You will also need an IRS form 4506T. And again, this is built into the online application, so you can just fill it out online and sign it online as well. You will have to upload some documents to demonstrate your expenses and or your revenue. So generally speaking, everyone will be uploading gross receipts documentation and upload the documents that you have available to you. Tax returns are the best. If you have your 2019 tax returns, included any amended returns you may have filed, please upload those. If you have completed and sent to IRS your 2020 tax returns, please upload those. If you do not have your tax returns, please use whatever else you might have, including maybe some financial statements that you produce. If you have a point of sale report, for a partnership, if you have a partnership IRS form 1065, or even bank statements, if that's what you have available to you. But a reminder, tax returns are always the best proof of documentation when it comes to gross receipts. Next slide, please. Our next few slides are going to walk you through some additional documentation you may need to provide. And you'll see that these are tied to the type of calculation you're utilizing to determine your grant amount. So if you're using calculation 1 or 2, you're going to submit what we just talked about. You're also going to submit your 3 most recent months of bank statements. This is to help verify you as a business, that you have a business account, and also verify your account number and routing numbers, because SBA is going to wire you the funds once the grant is approved. Again, you also need to make sure you have your 2020 gross receipts verification. Those tax returns are preferred, but you may also submit your prepared financial statements. Just please make sure you sign and date those financial statements before you submit them. In the next slide, we talk about the third calculation.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hello? The third calculation is the one that relates to businesses that may have just started or maybe have not opened their doors yet, but have certainly incurred costs, and they want to apply utilizing their cost method. So this documentation is going to actually require you to provide proof of those expenses that you incurred as you're trying to open up your restaurant or food business. So in addition to the things that we just talked about, your 2020 and 2021 gross receipts, if you have any. Again, your tax returns, point of sale reports are the best ways to do that. You also need to provide expense documentation. And this can take a lot of different forms. Again, we ask that you provide what you have. So if you utilize a CPA or an accounting or bookkeeping service, and they can provide you with the CPA comfort letter, that is something that we recommend. It is not required, but we do recommend that you provide that if you are able to. It will speed up your grant processing time. If you do not have that, then ask that you provide financial statements that you've prepared, and then any expense documentation you have. So these can be payroll documents if you do have employees that you're paying. It can include copies of debts like invoices and things that you've paid. If you use a business credit card, you could use the business credit card statement to help outline some of the debts that you've paid. Likewise, if you have those invoices, like I mentioned, if you have invoices because you hired some contractors to do work for you, build your outdoor seating, for example, you can submit copies of those documents to demonstrate expenses that you incurred during that period. If we go to the next slide, so we're getting close on time here. If you are one of these businesses that you see listed on the screen, brew pubs, tasting room, wineries, bakeries, or inns, please note you will also need to demonstrate that you had at least 33% of your gross revenue attributable to sales to the public in 2019. So this means that at least 33% of your gross receipts were from on-site sales to the public. And again, we're looking at 2019 only. And you can demonstrate that by providing whatever documentation you have to show that. There's some examples listed on the screen, and there's also some examples in our program user guide. Next slide, please. So if you want help applying, please do reach out to us. We have that call center that we mentioned. We have our district offices. We are located all over the state and all over the country for that matter. And then we also have our resource partners, like our small business development centers, our women business centers, and our SCORE chapters. All of them will provide free business assistance to you to help you get ready and apply for this program. Next slide, please. We do recommend that you leverage some assistance if you need it. We really urge you to make sure when you apply, you've gathered all your documents in advance, you have them all ready, and that you have gone through the sample application online to make sure you know how to answer all the questions. We do also recommend that you please double check your submission before you hit that submit button. Please verify you've attached all of the documents you wanted to attach. Please verify that your numbers are correct, especially any banking account and routing numbers. And just please double check that you've completed all of the fields. Once you submit, it's going to be very difficult to make any corrections. So please double check everything is accurate, everything is attached to your application before you submit it. The next slide, please. We do have, everybody can apply today if you would like. We do have priority processing periods. So for the first 21 days, SBA is processing applications received from women, veterans, and socially and economically disadvantaged applicants. And the next slide will kind of outline that a little bit more. So what does it mean? That means that the business is owned at least 51% and managed by a woman, veteran, or socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, or a combination thereof, that the ownership gets you to at least 51%. So if you have multiple owners of the business, let's say you have a woman owner at 20%, you have a veteran that owns another 40%, you can add those two together and you will be over the 51% ownership threshold to qualify for this processing in phase one. Next slide, please. Socially and economically disadvantaged, we do have definitions on our website. So if you are a Black American, Hispanic American, Native American, including Alaskan Natives and Native Hawaiians, Asian Pacific American, or subcontinent Asian American, you are presumed to be socially disadvantaged. And economically disadvantaged just refers to individuals who are socially disadvantaged, plus had their ability to compete in the free enterprise system impaired due to diminished capital and credit opportunities as compared to others in the same business area who are not socially disadvantaged. So again, that's a mouthful, but you can also read that on our website if you want to read it more carefully. And please note that this is a self-certification, so you do not need to provide any documentation to prove a social or economic disadvantage or ownership by women or veterans as well. And the next slide, we can go one more slide, please. Just wanted to make you aware of funding set aside. So of the $28 billion available, SBA is carving out and setting aside money to help our smallest of our small businesses. So $5 million is set aside for applicants with 2019 gross receipts of not more than $500,000. Also, $4 billion is set aside for applicants with gross receipts in 2019 of $500,000 up to $1.5 million. And then another $500 million is set aside for applicants with their 2019 gross receipts of less than $50,000. So this is to ensure that some of our smallest businesses have access to this program. And next slide, I think we're at the end. Yes. So for the offices that we're helping today, this is how to reach us. If you are located outside of California, please note that the link on the bottom will enable you to find your closest SBA office or your closest resource center, Small Business Development Center, SCORE, or Women Business Center. So please do reach out to us for assistance. Ben, I was going to bring you back on. I don't know if you want to wrap up.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you so much for covering the not only the calculations but also the other information that was on there. Clearly, by the chat, and Don and Heather and Lee and Randy are all in the chat answering questions for folks, and I think we got through almost all of them. If there are any additional questions, please feel free, use these email addresses. Brett, I know that you've got a couple of questions and we're stuck on a part there on the application. Let's see if we can get you the information that you need in order to do this. We have resource partners. I see Ron Fong in our chat as well, from our API small business program here in Los Angeles. They're ready to assist our small business owners to be able to access this program. So thank you, Ron, for being here, and thank you for all of our interpreters that have worked diligently to make sure that this was available in multiple different languages for everybody to attend. We will be continuing to have more of these. However, as the Chamber has indicated, they're going to go ahead and publish this as well and send it out to those that have registered. So we will make sure that we get this information out to folks. With that, I wanted to take the time to thank you, Julie, for your assistance in making sure that this was possible. Heather Lutzy from our Sacramento District Office, as well as Don Golick from our Fresno District Office, and all of the SBA team that has been here today. But I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the Congresswoman for her kind words at the beginning of this presentation, and the Assembly member for joining us. And none of this would have been possible without the hard work and dedication of Maria Salinas, president of the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce, and her phenomenal team of resources to be able to make this all possible. There are a variety of different segments that they hold, and I'm going to turn it back over to the LA Chamber team to be able to cover some of the different upcoming workshops that are coming in. Alejandra or Andrea, is that...
Sorry, Ben. I had some technical difficulties there for a minute.
Alejandra, your volume is really low.
My internet went down.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So just a quick announcement to everyone. And of course, a special thanks to you, Ben. Thank you so much for helping us get this together. Your team is just great. Awesome. So thank you so much. Just two quick announcements for everyone here today. Thank you again for joining us. And again, today was a special session for Small Business Strong. We do have another Small Business Strong coming up May 19th. We are going to be talking about reopening guidelines. We have OSHA here to talk to you all. Now, a reminder to everyone, sometimes there are some fees or fines if you do not have the appropriate reopening guidelines, so be sure to join us. And we also have the Employers Group, which is an HR company that will also share with you how you can safely bring your employees back to work. And another announcement that I have for you, and I apologize, I'm having some technical difficulties. The city of Los Angeles launched Logistics Victory. Now they are providing PPE equipment to many companies. Just recently, they opened up to the public businesses. So make sure that you go on to lovela.org to find out what the prices are for all of these PPE items that you can find. There are gloves, masks, and gowns. There's a lot there for you if you are interested. And again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us and hope to see you here again for Small Business Strong, May 19th. We are here once a month. Thank you, everyone.